The palace chamberlain's guards, an official escort and security detail, aren't taking anyone out of the city today. Their mission is to bring someone back. They travel north until they reach a red-gated mansion, the home of Prince Chun. He isn't expecting guests, but the Imperial procession isn't here for him. They're looking for his 2-year-old son. The little boy, terrified of the strangers, hides in a cupboard. Servants try to pull him out and carry him away, but he fights back, screaming, sobbing, scratching, and wailing. Once they finally manage to calm him, they take him to the Forbidden City. This 2-year-old boy has just been chosen to rule China. His name is Puyi. Puyi is destined to be the next emperor of the Qing Dynasty, and the Chinese people will revere him as a living god. This video draws heavily from Edward Behr's excellent book, The Last Emperor. You can find the link in the description. It's Puyi's coronation ceremony, and the boy can't take it anymore. For what feels like an eternity, strange men parade before him, speaking incomprehensible words. Ministers, palace guards, officers, and other officials approach, performing a ritual bow, kneeling 3 times and touching their heads to the ground 9 times. A kowtow. Each man pledges his allegiance, words that mean nothing to the young boy, to the 2-year-old. It's terrifying and utterly bewildering. The one person who could soothe him, who would calm him down and make him feel safe, isn't there. His wet nurse. Puyi isn't allowed to see his mother, and Nurse Wang is her replacement. She plays with him, breastfeeds him, sleeps beside him. She's his primary comfort and favorite companion. But she's been excluded from the ceremony. Puyi starts to fidget. He's also cold. The hall is freezing. He tells his father, Prince Chun, that he wants to go home, then begins to cry. Prince Chun is desperate. No occasion could be more important than this. It must go well. He tries to comfort his son, saying it'll be over soon. While those words might have soothed Puyi, to the palace staff who overhear them, they sound like a grim prophecy, not just for the emperor's reign, but for the fate of the Qing dynasty itself. The Qing dynasty began in 1644 after the Manchu people, a minority ethnic group, overthrew the Han people, the majority ethnic group, at its peak in 1790. The Qing was the 4th largest dynasty of all time at the time of Puyi's coronation. China had more citizens than any other country. When the boy took the throne, he became the ruler of nearly 1/3 of the world's population. China had been ruled by dynasties for over 2,000 years, and the emperor's power had remained virtually limitless on paper. The Qing emperor was arguably the most powerful human being on earth, but in reality, China and its dynasty had been in decline for a long time. A series of internal power struggles had weakened the emperor's position, leading to this seemingly bizarre moment. Yet, Puyi wasn't chosen as emperor despite his age, but because of it. This is Cixi, also known as the Dragon Lady. As a teenager, she was chosen to be a concubine of the emperor. After his death, she seized control of the empire, effectively ruling China for nearly 50 years as Empress Dowager. To maintain her power, she installed underage boys as puppet emperors. But as the last of them grew older, tensions rose. Now, he is gravely ill. Cixi knows he'll soon be dead, and she's willing to do anything to hold onto power. After losing a war against Japan, China was heavily in debt as partial payment. Cixi allowed foreign forces to claim territory and valuable resources. China was weakened, its population oppressed, and the Forbidden City a place of intrigue and conspiracy. Cixi was under immense pressure. Her health was deteriorating. She urgently needed a new puppet. Technically, as long as Puyi remained underage, his father, Prince Chun, would be regent. Prince Chun himself was loyal to Cixi and also incompetent, unlikely to outshine her. Exactly what she needed. After little Puyi was seized from his home, everything seemed to be working out for her. The day after, as expected, her previous puppet emperor died. He was poisoned, but before Cixi could make her next moves, she too died, and a 2-year-old sat on the throne. Of course, all of this was lost on Puyi. All he knew was that some important-looking people took him away from his mom, put him in a fancy robe, and were doing all sorts of strange things in front of him. The reason, he was now considered a living god to everyone he encountered, no longer an ordinary toddler. 3 years later, Puyi is 5 years old, and this is what a typical day might have looked like for him. He opens his eyes, nestled on a massive kang, the platform bed where he sleeps every night. Snuggled against Nurse Wang, Puyi must get dressed. Custom dictates that his clothes must never have been worn before. Yesterday's outfit, his silk tunic, padded waistcoat, sable jacket, and fur-lined coat, has already been disposed of. Of course, he won't dress himself. As with everything, the eunuchs will take care of it. They are his servants. If you wanted to serve in the imperial court of the Qing dynasty, you had to become a eunuch. That meant undergoing castration, which guaranteed the emperor was the only fertile man in the palace, ensuring every child born there was his. Like all male king subjects, eunuchs wore a particular kind of queue. Only eunuchs of the imperial presence were allowed to look at Puyi. All others had to look at the ground or turn away. They had no beards, their heads were bowed, and their voices were high, as most had been castrated before puberty. Since tradition dictated a person couldn't reach heaven if they weren't buried whole, eunuchs carried their removed genitals at all times in small jars filled with salt water. The emperor is hungry. At a signal, the eunuchs immediately prepare a huge buffet for him. Now, like every other day, he must visit the eastern palaces. Here, his other mothers live, 5 women who were either married to or concubines of the 2 previous emperors. To reach the eastern palaces, Puyi must walk through the city, again accompanied by eunuchs. Wherever Puyi goes, dozens of eunuchs accompany him. One walks 30 yards in front, warning people to make way. Then come to chief eunuchs, walking on either side of the path. About 2 feet behind the center of the procession is Puyi himself, walking, attended by the junior eunuchs. Then come eunuchs of the imperial presence, carrying clothing, a parasol, a canopy, more eunuchs still, carrying boxes of cakes and delicacies. Then eunuchs of the imperial dispensary, and finally, at the rear, eunuchs carrying chamber pots and commodes. If along the way Puyi realizes he needs to use the toilet, the eunuchs will rush forward with a chamber pot, then rush away with it to inspect the outcome. Puyi arrives according to ritual. Each mother asks after Puyi's health, though whether they genuinely care is less clear. Lady Yu, for her part, believes little boys should be kept healthy by half-starving them. She holds considerable power over Puyi. She's the widow of Guangshu, Puyi's poisoned predecessor. She is Prince Chun's co-regent. In a few years, she will banish Puyi's beloved nurse Wang, not even allowing her to say goodbye. Though Puyi hates all of his mothers, he has a special hatred for Lady Yu. On the way back, Puyi is in a bad mood. Suddenly, he makes a decision. 2 of the eunuchs offended him. It's not clear how, but either way, he wants them flogged. The 2 offending eunuchs are made to expose their bottoms. 2 other eunuchs come forward, holding sticks. The eunuchs are beaten on the spot. Puyi watches, delight in his eyes. Back at the Hall of Supreme Harmony, he listens as court officials drone on and on. They speak of matters of state, providing information incomprehensible to the little boy. They come with documents, each requiring the emperor's seal. He applies the seal again and again and again, under the supervision of his tutors and the palace chamberlain. It's bewildering and terribly boring. As regent, Prince Chun holds the real power and makes the real decisions. But the seal must be applied by the emperor's hand. At last, after hours of talk and ceremony, Puyi is free. He wants to be entertained. He has no real friends to play with. But the eunuchs are not only his servants but also his entertainers. One of his favorite eunuchs puts on a puppet show. Puyi loves it and comes up with an idea. He wants to reward the puppet master with a cake, but before presenting the gift, he asks Nurse Wang to fill it with sharp pieces of metal. He tells her he wants to see what the eunuch looks like when he eats it. Wang manages to convince him to fill the cake with dried beans instead. Now Puyi asks for his air gun. He's looking for a practice target and chooses the eunuchs, but shooting eunuchs is only fun for so long. He's bored again. He sees a piece of dirt on the floor. He points at it and tells one of the eunuchs, "Eat that for me." And if a living god asks you to eat dirt, you better kneel down and eat it. At night is when the little boy feels safest, curled up in the arms of Nurse Wang. Sometimes he still misses his biological mother, but his memory of her is already hazy. He won't be allowed to see her again until he is 13. Puyi lives an isolated life. He has no idea that beyond the walls of the Forbidden City, the country he technically rules is in turmoil. It's October 1911 in Wuchang. A group of soldiers mutiny, turning against their corrupt generals. This uprising quickly spreads across the country, escalating into a full-blown rebellion against the dynasty. The Chinese people are fed up. For wars and increasing Western incursions have shrunk China's territory, and the majority Han population has been weary of Manchu rule for centuries. The people begin to dream of a more unified republic. Then the Imperial army switches sides, joining the rebels and leaving the dynasty without military defense. By February 1912, Prince Chun has renounced his position as regent. Empress Dowager Long Yu also steps down and agrees to Puyi's abdication, and just like that, the Qing dynasty is no more. China is now a republic, with the newfound freedom of The press, newspapers sprang up all over the country. Soon, outlets from every political camp began shouting over each other. In a highly polarized media landscape. If that sounds familiar, it should. Polarization and echo chambers are fueling record low trust in today's media, but today's sponsor, Ground News, is changing that. They've built the only app and website showing how stories are covered across the world, with context on each source's bias, reliability, and whether they're run by state media, corporations, or independent voices. Take China vowing to retaliate against countries that harm Beijing in their ongoing trade war with the U.S. Ground News lets us compare the coverage side by side. Chinese state media warns other countries that attempts to harm their economy in exchange for tariff exemptions are doomed to fail, while U.S. media strongly believes Trump will win this trade war. In a world where the truth can get buried under spin, this kind of clarity isn't just helpful, it's essential. We at Fern think Ground News is a great way to see through the biases and make up your own mind. So, script this the end of Puyi's reign? Not entirely. For the majority of the traditional Chinese population, the idea of a country without a monarch was strange. Abolishing the dynasty entirely was unthinkable, so the new rulers negotiated an agreement with the old monarchs. Puyi would be allowed to live on in the Forbidden City with his servants and personal fortune, plus an annual allowance of roughly $3.4 million in today's money. Even though Puyi officially abdicated the throne, he continued to symbolically sit on it, and he continued to apply the imperial seal to court documents. But now, these documents concerned insignificant matters: staff promotions, the transplantation of trees, when the eunuchs should change their uniforms. The Forbidden City had become a place of make-believe, and it began to feel like a golden cage, one that Puyi would soon desperately want to break out of. 8 years later, a well-dressed British gentleman enters the Forbidden City. He will bring a new kind of chaos to the divine palaces. His name is Reginald Johnston. Johnston is a respected Chinese linguist, a poet, and a calligrapher. Now, he will be the English teacher of China's emperor. But Johnston secretly begins to teach Puyi Western history and philosophy. Up until this point, the young emperor had only studied Chinese classics. Under Johnston's influence, however, Puyi falls in love with British culture and begins to change. Normally, all male subjects of the Qing dynasty were required to wear a queue. But soon Puyi will simply cut his off, a major offense to tradition. He begins to dress like an English gentleman instead, starts speaking a mix of English and Chinese. And from now on, he will call himself Henry. Puyi also wears glasses, which the dowager consorts will not approve of. He rides a bike through the Forbidden City and falls in love with movies, but most of all, he becomes obsessed with a strange new invention from the West, the telephone. He makes calls to people in Beijing and hangs up before announcing who it is. One time, he even orders a meal to a false address. Likely the first royal prank call in history. Puyi increasingly gets an idea of what the outside world actually looks like, and everything he's missing out on. He announces that once he's old enough, he wants to leave the country and study at Oxford, just like his teacher. On June 3, 1922, he tries to make this dream come true. He asks Reginald Johnston to sneak him out of the Forbidden City, but Johnston, the man who planted all these dreams in Puyi's head, refuses. If Puyi were to leave, Johnston would lose his position, with all its perks and status. Puyi has no one else to help him escape, and though he doesn't fully realize it yet, he's being entrapped even further. The dowager consorts, who also depend on him for their livelihood, have figured out a way to make escape impossible. Puyi faces a decision. He must choose a bride. His only guide for photographs selected by the dowager consorts. He is 16 years old. The pictures are small. The women's face is difficult to discern. He draws a circle around one that looks pretty. This is Wengshu, a 12-year-old Manchu girl. But the dowager consorts don't consider her a suitable first choice. She's an aristocrat, but too poor to be empress. He chooses again. This time, he points to a 15-year-old girl from a prominent, rich family. The dowager consorts are pleased. Her name is Wanrong. To tiny pictures, one will be his wife, one will be his consort. He's encouraged to point to other pictures to choose secondary consorts, but Puyi refuses. One is enough. The pictures he selected are taken away. He won't see either girl until his wedding night. A couple of months later, just after the wedding, Puyi is with his empress wife for the first time. He has no experience with women now. On his first wedding night, he's supposed to consummate the marriage, but he doesn't know how. No one told. How this works. He panics and runs away. Puyi didn't consummate his marriage then, and it's probable he never did. When asked many years later, Puyi's younger brother said the ex-emperor was found to be biologically incapable of producing children. This may have been literally true, but some historians speculate that this was a euphemism, suggesting Puyi was in fact homosexual. The years after Puyi's abdication were years of chaos. The first Chinese premier declared himself emperor. A few weeks later, he abdicated, and 6 months later, he was dead. Meanwhile, warlords fought across the country, and Western powers continued to assert economic and territorial influence through concessions. China was weak, fragmented, and without central leadership. In November 1924, one of the warlords took control of Beijing and forced Puyi to leave the Forbidden City. He could keep his private wealth and would receive money from the state. But his days as emperor were finally over. To Puyi, now 18 years old, this didn't sound too bad. He had always wanted to live an ordinary life. From this day forward, he would be a private citizen, free to do whatever he wanted, but his freedom would look quite different from what he expected. 26 years later, in a Chinese prison, to be more precise, the Fushun War Criminals Management Center, the dynasty is no more, and neither is the republic. After a brutal civil war, Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communist Party have seized power, establishing re-education centers across the country, prisons and labor camps where enemies undergo communist brainwashing in harsh conditions. They either learn to be communists or die in the process. This is one of them. Prisoner number 981 is weak and absurdly incompetent. He only recently learned to tie his shoes and brush his teeth. He is hopelessly untidy and constantly forgets simple actions like turning off the faucet after use. Before his imprisonment in 1950, he'd never had to do such things. They'd been done for him. He'd been a living god, after all. Now, like so many others, he's going through so-called remolding. He's compiled a list of Japanese crimes in Manchuria. He attended presentations by Japanese war criminals. These crimes, he was told, he was to blame for. He begins to realize this, for this is Puyi, the prison's so-called #1 traitor. After leaving the Forbidden City, he aligned himself with the Japanese. They first housed him in Tianjin, then enthroned him as emperor of the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo in Manchuria. The region was invaded by Japan in 1931. For 11 years, he'd been the puppet emperor once again, controlled by the Japanese, legitimizing their myriad war crimes in Manchuria. When the Soviets invaded Manchuria in 1945, Puyi had been captured, tried as a war criminal at the military tribunal for the Far East. He'd lied shamelessly to save his skin, disavowing all responsibility for his role as a ruler and blaming the Japanese, his former ally. Shortly after the Chinese Communist Party came to power in 1949, the Soviets sent him back to China. Now, in Fushun prison, he's being remolded. The Chinese communists realize he's a powerful symbol, an incarnation of everything they're against: decadent imperialism and capitalist greed. If he can be turned into a communist, anyone can. It would be the ultimate symbol of their ideological supremacy. Puyi will spend 9 years at the prison camp, listening to lectures, grappling with his guilt, and committing to paper his many sins. In the end, he is released, weak, shrunken, and humble. Puyi is now a true believer, a die-hard communist. At least, that's what he says. After being released from prison, Puyi moved in with his sister in Beijing. At one point, he even worked as a tour guide in the Forbidden City, the very place where he was once crowned the emperor of the 4th largest dynasty in human history, ruling over a third of the world's population. A private citizen at last, Puyi eventually took a job as a gardener, working quietly among the plants. It seemed that Puyi, at least, found some sort of freedom. Throughout his life, he wore many faces. As a toddler, he was traumatized by sudden kidnapping. As a boy, he took pleasure in torturing innocent servants. As a teenager, he dreamed of becoming an Oxford student. As emperor of Manchukuo, he was complicit in horrendous crimes against humanity. And as a prisoner, he was repentant and humble. He died on October 17, 1967.